to move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Stewart McDonald.
Aye. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's always a pleasure to see you in the chair this evening. Can I begin by saying the obvious, that it's been a busy day for myself, my good friend on the other side of the House, the Right Honourable Gentleman from Chingford and Woodford Green, and the Honourable Gentleman for East Worthing and Shoreham, as we contend with the biggest threat, the biggest policy challenge that we face, that is China, obviously central to this adjournment debate on Taiwan this evening. But before I get fully into those remarks, I also want to put on record my thanks to the IPAC team, the IPAC Secretariat, and in particular Luke de Pulford, who does so much work with myself and parliamentarians from across the House on all issues in relation to China, and the support they've given me for this debate tonight is of course no different. It would be entirely right to start the debate on Taiwan this evening, Madam Deputy Speaker, by congratulating the new President-elect of Taiwan, Lai Ching-te, on his stunning victory in the recent presidential elections, and also to pay tribute to the outgoing President of Taiwan, Tsai Ing-wen, who I had the pleasure of meeting in late 2022 in Taipei. It's always been said, historically, that it's the US President that is the leader of the free world, but I think these days we could all agree that is a burden shared beyond the Oval Office by some others who are willing to stand up to authoritarianism and stand in defence of the democratic open society against the authoritarian closed alternative. And Taiwan's outgoing president, along with others, such as Ukraine's President Zelensky or Estonia's Prime Minister Kallas, have been such leaders. And those of us in the House who believe in the open society, who believe in the international rules-based system, owe a great debt to people like President Tsai Ing-wen for her public service. Madam Deputy Speaker, since the recent presidential elections in January, the context of cross-strait relations has changed. Beijing has sought to establish a new normal in an increased campaign of intimidation and grey zone aggression against Taiwan. China has responded to the outcome of the election by snatching a diplomatic ally in Nauru. It has altered an air route in the Taiwan Strait and is growing increasingly aggressive in its patrols of Taiwan's Kinmen Islands. References to, quote, a peaceful reunification have been dropped entirely, and China's defence spending now stands at 7.2% of GDP, more than double what it was a decade ago.
Don't give way.
And on his birthday, no less, Madam Deputy Speaker, I continue the tradition of giving way to the honourable gentleman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I first of all thank the honourable gentleman for Glasgow South for bringing this forward? And I think it'd be in order, I want to be on Hansard saying this. Can I congratulate the honourable gentleman and the other gentleman from Woodford Green as well, and others in this chamber for their courageous stand, undiminished as they are. Does the honourable member not agree that the treatment of Taiwan exemplifies the attitude shown by the Chinese to democracy and freedom, shown also in their disgraceful behaviour towards the honourable gentleman and others, and their personal privacy, as well as hacking websites? Does the honourable member not agree that steps must be taken to highlight that Western democracies will not stand idly by whilst democratic decisions are overturned and China rules not by agreement but instead by aggression?
Yes, the honourable gentleman preempts much of what I'm intending to come to in my speech, Madam Deputy Speaker, but I agree with every word he had to say. China continues its aggressive sabre-rattling in the Taiwan Strait by sending warships and planes across the median line of the Taiwan Strait, an air defence identification zone, and it continues its enormous campaign of cyber-aggression against Taiwan's public and private institutions, including its critical infrastructure. Earlier this month, a report by Taiwan's Defence Ministry describes Beijing as having launched a multi-front saturated grey zone tactic to harass Taiwan. And the previous report in September 2023 noted China had increased the scale, frequency and intensity of drills and exercises against Taiwan in order to strengthen its operational preparation for a future invasion. China is also deploying civilian assets to press its claims, dispatching civil aircraft, unmanned aerial vehicles and weather balloons to fly close to and over Taiwan, also using marine survey vessels and hydrographic survey ships as a cover for its military. They're also deploying a maritime militia, the largest fleet ever put to sea, to advance geopolitical objectives. And these moves, Madam Deputy Speaker, are exactly what I mean by trying to establish a new normal. Unilaterally changing the status quo across the Taiwan Strait, escalating tensions in a region where China's expansionist behaviour has seen it employ nearly 80 different grey zone tactics against neighbouring states. And our inability to deter this kind of aggression is what's emboldening Beijing and its strategic partners, Russia and Iran, undermining our security and international security further. But at this point, it's important to consider what the people of Taiwan themselves actually think. What does Taiwanese public opinion tell us? It's important to stress the value that people in Taiwan clearly place upon having an open and democratic way of life. 67% of people identify primarily as Taiwanese. Only 3% identify as Chinese. Nearly half support formal independence. That rises to 2/3 if maintaining the status quo were not possible. Only 1 in 10 want to see unification with China, but that shouldn't be misread as meaning they want unification under Communist Party rule. And this all stands in stark contrast to the view in mainland China, where more than half of the population back a full-scale war in order to take control of Taiwan. And it's important to stress as well, Madam Deputy Speaker, that China has never ruled Taiwan. It has never ruled Taiwan. It's a democracy of 24 million people. And so I would ask the Minister, when she gets to the dispatch box, to state the government's commitment to the principle of self-determination and that this does apply to the people of Taiwan. And on the issue of the status quo, the UK position continues to be defined by the One China policy and the maintenance of the status quo. But the One China policy does not and has never equated to an acceptance of Beijing's One China principle, that Taiwan is an inalienable part of China, despite what Beijing may say. It is merely a recognition that Beijing makes such a claim. China's actions have unilaterally and consciously changed the status quo. It is seeking to create the new normal I've already outlined, and it has consistently done so along its border and over the Senkaku Islands and in the South China Seas. So my question to the Minister is, why does the government keep repeating that it's the UK position to maintain the status quo, as the status quo itself is being unilaterally changed and eroded by China? And part of the reason why I wanted to bring this debate forward, Madam Deputy Speaker, is because of the importance, the economic importance of Taiwan to the global economy, but also to our own. In a recent report earlier this year, Bloomberg Economics estimated that the first-year price tag of a war in the Taiwan Strait would sit at around $10 trillion, equal to about 10% of global GDP, whilst a blockade would equate to about 5% of the global economy. Now, one company, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC, makes 2 in 3 semiconductors and 90% of the world's most advanced chips.
Will the honourable member give way?
Certainly.
I'm grateful to the honourable member. On the company that he mentions, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, they make a massive proportion of silicon chips. And while the UK has niche strengths in semiconductor design and compound conductors, does he share the view that Britain will remain dependent on Taiwan for silicon chips for a long time to come?
Yes, the honourable gentleman is absolutely right, and this isn't just a uniquely British issue. This is an issue for the entire Western and democratic world. And on the issue of chips, it's just one area of a great number where that over-reliance is indeed a threat to our economic and security interests. To continue on the issue of TSMC, Madam Deputy Speaker, the total market cap of its 20 customers is worth around $7.4 trillion. To put that in context, that's over twice the size of the British economy. Taiwan sits at the nexus of shipping lanes. It connects the world to China, to South Korea, to Japan. Together, accounts for 40% of global manufacturing output. Half of the global container fleet passes through the Straits each year, dwarfing the traffic which passes through the Suez Canal. So with all of that in mind, and given it is the stated objective of the CCP to unify Taiwan with the mainland, either by force or some other form of coercion, can I ask the Minister what modelling has been done by the government on what the impact of a war or a blockade of Taiwan would mean for the UK economy? What are the industries and sectors here in the UK that would be most at risk? Is there a strategy for de-risking? What engagement has happened with industry around such a shock?
I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Again. Mr McDonald.
It's been around 5 years since I've done an adjournment debate, Madam Deputy Speaker, so forgive me for forgetting the rules. But back to my questions to the Minister on de-risking. Is there a strategy for de-risking? What engagement has gone on with industry about a potential shock in the Taiwan Strait? And what engagement is also going on with other public institutions, not least the devolved governments who have responsibility, for example, for universities, which is just one part of our society that is so hugely dependent on cash from China. I guess the question can be boiled down to what is being done to build the economic resilience needed to prepare us for what would be an economic shock bigger than the financial crisis and the COVID pandemic combined? Or are we, as I said earlier, to the government's response to news of Chinese espionage, again going to turn up to a gunfight with a wooden spoon? Turning to UK relations with Taiwan, Madam Deputy Speaker, the UK is Taiwan's third biggest trading partner in Europe. It's the 21st largest overall. Bilateral trade totals £8.6 billion. That was the last number in 2022. Now, to be fair to the government, the enhanced trade partnership that the UK signed with Taiwan last November promises further growth. It's a good model. It's a good model for other European countries to follow. And in response to that, of course, as expected, Beijing demands that the UK stops using trade in order to improve relations with Taiwan. Whilst promoting cultural exchanges and people-to-people contact is obviously a good thing, and we all want to see more of that, yet again we see Beijing's response has sought to stop Taiwan from doing the same, persecuting artists and cultural figures, which of course is creating a chilling effect within Taiwan's creative industries. But I also want to turn to the issue of Taiwanese resilience to hostile disinformation, not least the experience that the Taiwanese have got of dealing with hostile disinformation from China in their recent elections. I would suggest to the government that working with Taiwan and learning from their experience, as I mentioned, especially during the recent elections, where we saw a disinformation tax on a scale just unknown, sponsorship of conspiracies in order to undermine trust in the electoral process and other public institutions, there is much we can learn from Taiwan and how they deal with that. Their experience of hostile disinformation attacks is extraordinary, and it would be negligent if we didn't seek to learn from that. So, on relations more broadly, I think there are opportunities for new partnerships, new exchanges, new relationships to be built. But on the issue of the Taiwanese Representative Office, can I ask the government to consider reviewing the status of the TRO as appropriate, given Taiwan's importance to the UK, both as a trading partner, but also a country that we share common interest and common values with? To conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, today's age of geopolitical insecurity and competition is one that cannot be sat out. To quote Gramsci's interregnum, the old is dying and the new is struggling to be born. Our old ways of thinking on China, on Taiwan, are indeed old, and we need new ideas fit for the modern age and the challenges that come with it. The China challenge is one we all must confront. It's not, as some think, a faraway foreign policy issue. It is the confluence of foreign and domestic policy that touches every aspect of our society: economics, technology, democracy, energy security, trade, and so much more. Taiwan is central to that challenge, and the competition between the open society and the closed society is represented in fewer places as well as it is in Taiwan. And just like our friends in Ukraine, our friends in Taiwan want to live in an open and free society. So we must continue to offer them our full support, our full solidarity, not in words but in actions. And I asked the Minister to genuinely seek new ways to upgrade and modernise our relationship with Taiwan. New partnerships, new institutions, new collaborations, new and positive opportunities. We should do that with confidence and a sense of purpose, but also with the full knowledge that in standing with Taiwan, we'll be on the right side of history.
Minister Anne-Marie Trevelyan.
Apologies, Madam Deputy Speaker. I was listening intently. Thank you very much indeed. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful to the honourable member for Glasgow South for securing this debate, and I thank both him and other honourable members for their thoughtful contributions, and I'll do my best to respond to all the points that have been raised. Taiwan is a thriving economy of over 23 million people, with whom the UK shares both values and deep ties. And members of this House, of course, will be familiar with the unique nature of our relationship. Whilst we have no diplomatic relations, we have strong unofficial links built on many shared interests, including security and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific, trade, innovation, climate action and global health. And our engagement on these important issues is supported by the British Office Taipei and the Taipei Representative Office in London. Madam Deputy Speaker, the UK and Taiwan share a thriving £8 billion trade and investment relationship, and this encompasses a wide range of goods and services, not least the UK's export of over £340 million of Scotch whisky to Taiwan last year alone. Always a good statistic, I think. Our enhanced trade partnership, which we announced last year, will also be able to further strengthen this trade relationship. Now, meanwhile, Taiwan produces, as the honourable member highlighted, most of the world's high-performance semiconductors that drive our global digital economy. It therefore has a critical role in the technology supply chains that underpin those global markets, and it invests heavily in research innovation. So, yes, of course.
Thank the Minister for giving way. The European Union currently has a market share in semiconductors of 9% globally and has set an ambition for 20% by the year 2030. I wonder if she could enlighten us on what the UK's ambition is in semiconductor manufacture.
Thank you. I don't have the figures to hand, but it is exactly to that point that obviously we want to see our flourishing science and technology cooperation continue to grow, and that indeed was set out in the government's national semiconductor strategy, to which I would point the honourable gentleman, which we published last year. We hold regular expert-level talks with Taiwan on a range of those important issues, including especially energy and health. But we are, of course, close partners on climate action, increasingly sharing our expertise on offshore wind and multi-use port development. And our enhanced trade partnership, which is a really important developing area, will be able to further deepen our mutual cooperation on net zero technologies, which are, of course, vital to both energy security and to our shared imperative to keep those global temperatures from rising even more perilously. Madam Deputy Speaker and the honourable gentleman for Glasgow South stated eloquently the UK's position, the UK's long-standing position is that we consider the Taiwan issue one to be settled peacefully by people on both sides of the strait without the threat or use of force or coercion. That is why, of course, the UK and the wider world have such a clear interest in enduring peace and stability in the Strait and throughout the Indo-Pacific. Because a conflict across the Strait would, of course, be a tragedy, both in terms of any human cost, but livelihoods across the region and that wider global economic impact. Taiwan and the Taiwan Strait are vital links in the global economy, driving prosperity and innovation. And as the Honourable Gentleman highlighted, a conflict could destroy world trade by, according to Bloomberg analysis, up to 10% of the global economy. No country, whether high, middle or low income, could possibly shield itself from the economic repercussions of such a crisis, including China. So that's why this government is clear that we do not support any unilateral attempts to alter the status quo in the Taiwan Strait, and I would like to assure members that we are continually working to strengthen the UK's contingency planning across a range of international challenges, including those threats to global supply chains. And members, I hope, will be aware of the recently launched Critical Imports and Supply Chain Strategy, published by the Department of Business and Trade, which tackles some of these issues in greater depth than I will set out this evening. Yes, of course.
Because of course, all of us would agree with the Minister that none of us want to see change to the status quo, certainly not a violent change to the status quo in cross-strait relations. But given there is a change, China is creating this new normal as we speak. It's been doing so for some time now. Clearly, the strategy of the government and Western partners isn't deterring that. So what will we see that will change from herself and Western partners? And on the issue of the Bloomberg analysis, is there government analysis and will she publish it?
Madam Deputy Speaker, we have a great deal of work ongoing, as the Honourable Gentleman would expect, and in due course I'm sure that we will bring that to the House, but importantly what we want to do today, and he has stated it very clearly, and I know that he will speak for all members of the House, even though there's only a few of us here this evening, that position, the one that the UK Government holds, is one that is held by all members of the House and should be very clearly heard in support of that Taiwan status quo. The Honourable Member, of course, mentioned, Madam Deputy Speaker, that just a few weeks ago Taiwan held its presidential and legislative elections, and as my noble friend the Foreign Secretary said at the time, those elections are testament to Taiwan's incredibly vibrant democracy, and I join him in offering warm congratulations to William Lai and his party on his successful election. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, this comes at a time when China's actions, as to the Honourable Gentleman's point, are threatening to undermine that peace and stability in the Strait, because China is refusing to renounce the use of force in pursuit of its objectives. It's deploying economic power to coerce countries with whom it disagrees over Taiwan, as it did just recently with Lithuania, for instance. And China continually takes assertive actions near Taiwan, including its military flights, which are escalating tensions. This is not the conduct of a responsible international actor, and it is not conducive to enduring peace and stability across the Strait. So that's why the UK continues to work with our international partners to underscore the importance of peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait, as we did most recently in our statement by G7 leaders in December. And the Foreign Secretary reiterated this in his statement following the election that I just mentioned. That's why the UK continues to support Taiwan's inclusion internationally where it is clearly in the global public interest. This government believes that the people of Taiwan have a valuable contribution to make on many issues of global concern, and the international community should be able to benefit from Taiwanese expertise in a range of areas. We therefore continue to work hard with our partners to support Taiwan's participation in international organisations as a member where statehood is not a prerequisite, and as an observer or guest where it is. For example, we continue to make the case for Taiwan's participation at the World Health Assembly, as its inclusion benefits global health, including through its experts' participation in technical meetings and information exchanges. So to conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, if I may, the Government continues the UK's long-standing approach to relations across the Taiwan Strait. We continue to engage with Taiwan within the bounds of our unofficial relationship, which brings many benefits to both of us. And we continue to work closely with our international partners to advocate for peace and stability and to discourage any activity that undermines the status quo. And we continue to advocate for Taiwan's meaningful international participation. Through these channels, the UK has an important role to play in supporting continued peace and stability in the Strait. We can only benefit from that continued engagement with Taiwan as a thriving democracy and an important economic partner. Thank you.
Thank you. The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as that opinion say aye. Aye. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order! Order!
The proceeding has ended. 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 The proceeding has ended.